Hello everyone, this is Dr. Altunöz. Welcome to our first lecture of this course. This week we are going to be talking a little bit more about what a histogram is, what a histogram is not, and how you create a histogram chart. This is a common source of frustration among the students. The first assignment contains a problem that requires you to work with a histogram to create one and to interpret one. And a lot of people get it wrong. We do have some additional resources on this, such as extra tutorial and informational videos from YouTube and the Math Center. But I decided to go over what a histogram is in a little bit more detail so that this source of confusion is cleared up. Also, it is important to understand what a histogram is compared to all the other types of charting because of the fact that what we use histograms for, among other things, is going to be building on this concept for units 2 and 3. Okay, so the whole idea of distributions and how we can look at probabilities and so on is going to be based on the idea of a frequency chart, which is a histogram. So let's take a look. I'm going to use an example to demonstrate everything here. We have some information that you can see on this chart. We have information from 52 weeks about a percentage of non-defective items that we have made for every week. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what the data is, but what we have here is every week people mark just how much good stuff we made and what percentage of it turned out to be defective. So in the first week, 55% of the items were non-defective, which means 45% were defective, and so on. You can see it here. So this number could range from 0 to 100. 100%, as you can see in week 12, means everything was perfect. And then we also have some really low numbers here and there. Like for example, week 11, 39% was or were non-defective and 61% were defective. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what this data is. Okay, so before we talk about what a histogram is and how you create one, I would like to show you what a histogram isn't. Okay, it is different than all the other types of charts that you're going to see. So let's take a look at a bar chart, which is what looks very similar to a histogram. Okay, so I'm going to select the data that I have and I'm going to insert a bar chart. So let's pick one that looks like this. Okay, I'm just going to select just the non-defective column. So here's a bar chart. Let me make it a little bit bigger. As you can see, a bar chart is a plot of every single one of these data points, starting from 1, going all the way to the end of the data set. Okay, and it shows you how these numbers changed over time. The leftmost side of this chart is the very beginning of the data set, and the rightmost side of this chart over here is the end of the data set. And it goes in order throughout all of the data points, so you can get an idea of what's going on. Okay, you can see that most of the time, just about all of the time, we were above 20, and most of the time we were above 40. Some of the time we were above 60, and very infrequently we were above 80. All right, so this is a bar chart. It is a chart that goes through all of the data points that we have in our data set one by one in order and shows you how they are changing. We could change this to a line chart, for example, and see the same thing. All right, so instead of having individual bars, we have just plotted the individual points and we have put lines to go through them. This is basically the same thing, it just looks different. Once again, the left side is the beginning of the data set, the right side is the end of the data sets, and so on. Okay, so let's go back to a bar chart. So this is a bar chart. A histogram is very different than what you are going to get from a bar chart or a line chart or anything like that. Okay, the other charts, like the line chart or the bar chart, they just plot all of these data points, but a histogram does something special. A histogram first summarizes the data, then plots a different set of numbers to demonstrate something for you. Okay, a histogram is basically a plot of frequencies. So let's say we are interested in finding out just how many of these weeks fell into different categories. How many of these weeks were showing not percentage non-defective between 10 and 20, 20 and 30, and so on. So we have an idea of how they were grouped into these different categories. Okay. Now you could sort of see the same thing here. You could see the high levels and how many of the high levels are and how much of the low levels are and so on. But it gets difficult to see when you look at a large data set. 52 isn't a small number. And it's all over the place. So some of the low numbers are here, 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 here. And if you wanted to, you could count the low numbers. So I have low numbers around 40. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have about 6 numbers that are close to 40. Do I want to count this? I don't know. How many high numbers do I have? Here's 100%, here's another 100%, and here are some other high numbers. So maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 were really good weeks, and so on. So you could take a look at the bar charts and get this sort of an idea, but why would we bother trying to see it manually? Okay, so that's what a histogram does. It will group for us these numbers into groups, into categories. What the histogram calls these is going to be bins. It's going to group them into bins, and it's going to count for you how many observations were counted in each of these bins. So let me show you an example, and then we'll go from there. We are going to click on, instead of inserting a chart like we usually do, we're going to use the data ribbon, and we are going to use data analysis. If you do not have the data analysis button, it means you have not yet turned on the data analysis tool pack in your add-ins. In order to do that, you will have to go through some steps, and those steps are outlined somewhere else in the course. Okay, there's a step-by-step tutorial that you can watch that shows you how to do it. I'm not going to get into that right now. So we go to data analysis, and then we pick histogram. Okay, here's our input range. Our input range is going to be all of these numbers. This is the data that we are going to use, that we are going to ask to be plotted. I'm going to leave the bin range empty for now, because I want to demonstrate what happens if you leave it empty. Okay, and I want to make sure I click on chart output. The first time you pull up this dialog box, it doesn't have the checkbox it does not have this box checked. So make sure you want the chart output clicked. And we want the output to go into a new worksheet play. Alright, so let's take a look. So here's what you get. We got a new worksheet, and we got a chart like this. You can see over here that it counted the various frequency of observation, how many times a particular set of numbers were observed. Okay, so for example, between 48 and 58, there were 4 items. Between 58 and 69, there were 5 items, or 5 weeks. There were 16 weeks that fell between 69 and 79. Okay, there were 9 weeks that fell between 79 and 89%. What was this? Percentage non-defective. Okay, so what it did is count in certain groups how many observations were recorded that fell within that particular bin. Okay, now the problem with this is that we let Excel pick its own bin ranges, bin categories. Okay, so 0 to 28, from 28 to 38.285, from 38.285 to 48.5, from 48.57 to 58.857. These numbers don't really make sense, okay? There is no reason to be grouping them like this. This isn't particularly wrong, but why would you divide up your bins with all of these decimals in them? So instead of doing that, we are going to go back and we are going to tell Excel our own category ranges. Okay, I'm just going to label this bins and I'm just going to go 10, 20. I want to group these numbers into bins of size 10. So here we are, from 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40. This makes a lot more sense. If you wanted to, you could make them go, in multiples of 20. So you would have 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, or you could have anything else you wanted. We might actually do one like that too in just a second. But let's take a look. So I have my bins the way I want them to be grouped. So what I want Excel to count is how many fell between 0 and 10. How many weeks had percentage non-defective values that fell between 0 and 10. How many of them had values that fell between 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, and so on. So data analysis, histogram. It's the same input range, but I want to tell Excel what my bins are. Okay, these are my categories into which Excel is going to group these observed values. There is really no reason, no situation where you would leave the bin range empty. Okay, why would you leave it to Excel to figure out what these categories are going to be? In any histogram that you make, you really should have a list of the categories, the bins defined, and go with that. Okay, and then we're going to go with a new worksheet file. Let's call this groups of 10, and then I want a chart output. Okay, see, this is a much better looking chart. Let me make this bigger. So you can see the groups make a lot more sense. And this is how many values were observed. I'm just going to format this so that we can see it a little bit more easily. That puts the observed numbers on there. Okay, so here's how you read it. This numbers that's sort of in the middle is saying to you that between 0 to 10 there were no observed values. This number over here is telling you that between 10 and 20 there were no observed values. Between 20 and 30 there was 1. Between 30 and 40 there were 2. You can see the same thing up here. The same numbers are what's on here. Okay, so for example, between 70 and 80 there were 17 weeks that had their percentage non-defective observations that fell between 70 and 80. Okay, between 80 and 90 there were 11 weeks that did that well, and between 90 and 100 there were 9 weeks that did that well. Now, just as an example, I'm going to go back to my data sheet just so you guys can see. I'm going to change the groups. So let's go 25, 50, 75, 100. I'm going to do another histogram just so you see the effects of different groupings. So I did not have to group them by tens. I could group them in any size of bins. So this is what it looks like when you group them into tens. This is what it looks like when you group them into percentiles or core, into 25%, 50, 75, and 100. So let's go to data analysis, histogram. I'll change my bin size. It's going to be this. And I want groups of 25, new sheet. Let's take a look. This is what it looks like. So you can group them in any group sizes you want. The thing to recognize here is that what is being plotted in the histogram is a summary of the initial data set that you got. Okay, so these numbers 1, 2, 4, 3, 5, 17, 11, and 9, these do not exist directly in the data sheet that we have. Okay, our numbers are like 55, 76, 74, 62, and so on. The histogram tool summarizes and counts how many of those individual observations fall within each of these groups that I'm interested in, and then plots those numbers up here. So this is different than all the other charts. This is not a direct translation of the data set into a graphical depiction. Okay, this is a summary. It is an analysis of the data set that is summarized in the way that I want. This has been summarized in groups of 10. This has been summarized in groups of 25. Okay, so this is the result of an analysis. The other thing that you need to remember, which is a really common mistake, is that the left side of a histogram does not show you the beginning of the data set or the earliest part of the data set, and the right side of the histogram over here does not show you the end of the data set or the later parts of the data set. There is no such thing as the beginning and the end in a histogram. Okay, all this is the x-axis here that you see, all it is the listing of the bins. This is different than what you see with a bar chart. In the bar chart, the left side is indeed the beginning of the data set. Okay, if you want me to, I can just put the numbers up here. So this is the beginning of the set, 55, 55, 74, 74. So the x-axis goes in order from the beginning to the end of the data set. If this was a timeline like 52 weeks, then this would be the beginning of the year and the right side would be the end of the year. No such thing exists in a histogram. Okay, this is not a depiction of time. The x-axis does not give you any indication of, this is what happened at the end of the year and this is what happened at the beginning of the year, kind of a thing. It does not do that. This is just laid out to display all of the bins that you're interested in. Okay, so this is something that I wanted to clarify because in the units, in the third question of the first assignment, you will have to do a histogram and you will have to interpret it. And a lot of people confuse it. Well, a lot of people can't make the chart, unfortunately. So hopefully this will be helpful. And then some people are confused about what the chart is actually showing them. And I hope this will clear up some of the confusions that exist on there.